Nobody warned her that the comeback would feel like nothing at first. No surge of confidence, no sudden clarity, no morning where she woke up and finally felt like herself again. Just an ordinary Tuesday, a cup of coffee going cold on the counter, the particular quiet of a house that used to feel like a battlefield and now just felt empty. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet, without announcement, without ceremony, without anyone watching, something in her changed direction. That is where it starts. Not in a therapist's office, not in a journal entry, not in a conversation that finally says all the right things. It starts in a moment so small and so private that most people dismiss it before they even register it happened. But that moment is everything. And if you have been waiting for your comeback to announce itself with more drama than that, I need you to hear something important before we go any further.
The most powerful transformations in human psychology almost never feel powerful when they begin. They feel like exhaustion reaching its final limit. They feel like the last possible breath before something permanently changes. They feel, more than anything else, like giving up. But they are not giving up. They are the moment the river finally stops flowing in the wrong direction. Stay with me through every stage of this because I'm going to take you somewhere by the end of this that most content about healing never reaches. Not theory, not comfort. The actual psychological mechanics of what happens when a person who has spent years giving everything they have to people who took it without returning it, finally turns that energy back toward themselves. And why that moment, quiet as it is the beginning of something that cannot be undone. Let's start with what nobody talks about honestly. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that does not show up on your face. You can be fully functional inside it. You can go to work, answer messages, make plans, laugh at the right moments, and still be carrying a weight so constant and so familiar that you have forgotten what it feels like to not carry it. This is the exhaustion of someone who processes the world too deeply for their own comfort. Not because they are weak, because they are wired differently. Research in social neuroscience has identified something called mirror neuron hyperactivity in high empathy individuals. In practical terms, what this means is that when an empath is around someone in emotional pain, their nervous system does not just observe that pain, it partially replicates it. The empath is not just watching suffering from a safe distance, they are running a version of it through their own body, every time, without a switch to turn it off. Now consider what that means over years of proximity to someone whose emotional state is permanently destabilized. Someone whose inner world is a landscape of chaos that the empath keeps trying to map and calm and fix. The empath is not just tired from the relationship, they are tired at a neurological level. Their system has been running at maximum capacity for so long that maximum capacity has started to feel like normal. And this is where something important needs to be said directly. You did not stay because you were stupid. You did not stay because you lacked strength. You stayed because the specific combination of your gifts and your attachment created a bond that was specifically, precisely, almost architecturally designed to be difficult to leave. Your ability to feel deeply was used against your ability to leave. Your capacity to hope was used against your capacity to see clearly. Your empathy, the thing that makes you extraordinary, was the very mechanism that held you in place. Understanding that is not about blame. It is about releasing the self-judgment that most people in this situation carry quietly for years after they finally walk away. The judgment that says, I should have known sooner. I should have left earlier. I should have been stronger than this. You were already stronger than most people could have been. The problem was not your strength. The problem was the direction your strength was pointed. That direction is about to change. Now here is the part of the comeback that most people describe in vague, inspirational language that sounds good, but does not actually prepare you for what the experience is like. So let me be more specific than that. The beginning of a genuine comeback in a person who has been emotionally depleted for an extended period does not feel like rising. It feels like settling. Like something that has been held at an unnatural tension for a very long time finally releasing. Like a muscle that has been clenched for so long it forgot how to unclench. And then, one unremarkable afternoon, it does. There is often no identifiable trigger, no final straw.
No dramatic confrontation that serves as the pivot point the story gets told around later. There is just a moment, sometimes in the middle of a completely ordinary exchange, where the empath realizes they are tired of the conversation they are in. Not just this conversation, every version of this conversation they have ever had. The one where they explain their needs and their needs get redirected back to someone else's. The one where they raise a concern and the concern becomes evidence of their own inadequacy. The one where they reach for genuine connection and find performance instead. They are tired, completely, finally. And that complete, final tiredness is the first real gift the experience has given them, because it is the sensation of a limit being reached. And a limit being reached means a direction is about to change. What happens in the days and weeks after that silent pivot is one of the most disorienting experiences a person can go through. Because the energy that was previously pouring outward, all that extraordinary perceptive and emotional capacity that was being used to decode, manage, navigate, and survive, suddenly has nowhere to go. It has been redirected, but it has not yet found a new destination. And for someone accustomed to being needed, accustomed to being the person who holds things together, accustomed to the identity of the one who shows up and stays, that absence of purpose can feel like falling. It is not falling, it is floating, but it does not feel like floating yet. This is the stage most people do not talk about with enough honesty. The stage between the leaving and the becoming. The stage where the empath is no longer who they were inside the dynamic, but has not yet built a clear sense of who they are outside it. The stage where the noise that the relationship generated, even when the relationship was painful, that noise was at least familiar, is now replaced by a silence that is strange and uncomfortable and occasionally terrifying. Here's what you need to understand about that silence. It is not empty. It only sounds that way because you have never heard it before. That silence is your own thoughts, uninterrupted for the first time in a long time. Your own preferences, surfacing without being filtered through someone else's reactions. Your own nervous system, recalibrating. Your own instincts, hesitantly beginning to send signals again to a person who spent years learning to dismiss them. And those instincts are going to say things worth listening to. There is a concept in psychology called proprioception, the body's ability to sense its own position in space. It is the reason you can close your eyes and still know where your hand is. When someone has been in a relationship that systematically undermined their inner perceptions, what happens to their emotional proprioception is the equivalent of being spun in circles until the sense of where you are becomes genuinely unreliable. You reach for your own center and your hand finds nothing. You trust your gut and your gut has been trained to distrust itself. The comeback, in its most essential form, is the recovery of emotional proprioception. It is the slow, patient, sometimes frustrating process of learning to locate yourself again, to notice what you actually feel, separate from what you have been told you should feel. To trust a reaction before you have had time to analyze whether the reaction is justified. To be in your body, in your instincts, in your perceptions, and believe them. This does not happen overnight. It happens in small, accumulating moments of self-confirmation. A moment where you think something feels wrong, and then discover that something was wrong and you were right the first time. A moment where you notice what you actually want for dinner rather than defaulting to what seems easiest to explain. A moment where you set a boundary, small, almost trivial, and the world does not collapse the way some part of your training told you it would. Each of these moments is a recalibration. Each one tells your nervous system something it forgot, that your perceptions are reliable, that your needs are real, that your instincts can be trusted, that you are, underneath the years of adaptation and accommodation and careful self-erasure, someone whose inner life is worth taking seriously. And as these moments accumulate, something begins to happen that is hard to describe but impossible to miss when it occurs. You begin to take up space differently. Not loudly, not aggressively, not in a way that announces itself or requires an audience. Just differently. The way you used to arrive in a room and immediately calibrate your energy to whoever was there. Reading the atmosphere, adjusting your volume, making yourself smaller or larger or softer or quieter to fit the emotional requirements of the space begins to change. Not because you stop caring about the people in the room, because you finally start caring about the person who walked into it. You start arriving as yourself, not as whoever the room needs you to be. This shift is subtle enough that most people in your life will not be able to name it, but they will feel it. The people who knew you inside the previous dynamic will feel it as a kind of quiet power that was not there before. The people who only met you after will simply experience it as the confidence of someone who knows who they are. Both of them are right. Now I want to talk about something that the empath in recovery almost always gets wrong in the middle stages of their comeback. Something that slows the process down significantly and creates unnecessary suffering. And it comes from a fundamentally understandable place. It comes from the desire to understand what happened. The mind that went through this experience is a highly analytical mind. It is a mind built for pattern recognition, for making sense of human behavior, for finding the thread of logic that connects seemingly disconnected events into a coherent narrative. This is part of what makes the empath extraordinary. This is also what makes them spend an enormous amount of post-recovery energy trying to construct the perfect, complete, fully coherent explanation for what happened in the relationship. Why did they do this?
What was the original damage that created those patterns?
What was the moment the dynamic was set? What would have happened if I had responded differently at this particular junction? Is there a version of this where it works out? Could it have been different? Was it ever real? These are the questions, and they are legitimate questions. They deserve some genuine attention. But here's the thing that most healing-focused content does not tell you clearly enough. You do not need the complete answer to move forward. You only need enough of the answer to stop the pattern from repeating. The empath who spends 2 years trying to fully understand the psychology of the person who hurt them is delaying their own comeback. Not because understanding is wrong, because at a certain point, the pursuit of understanding that particular relationship becomes a way of staying connected to it. The analysis becomes the attachment. The reconstruction of events becomes a substitute for the relationship itself. And the empath, who by nature forms deep bonds, is sometimes more comfortable in the discomfort of familiar pain than in the disorienting openness of actually moving on. This is not a flaw. It is a feature of deep emotional attachment being redirected in the absence of a better target. The solution is not to stop being someone who thinks deeply and attaches deeply. The solution is to give those capacities something new to attach to, something that returns what it receives. Which brings us to the part of the comeback that most people are waiting for without knowing exactly what they're waiting for. The point where the empath's gifts stop feeling like liabilities. Because here is one of the most quietly painful aspects of what the experience does to a person like this. The gifts themselves start to feel dangerous.
The capacity to feel everything so deeply, which was for the first several decades of your life simply part of how you experienced the world, starts to feel like a vulnerability after an experience that turned it into one. The ability to see into people, to perceive their needs before they articulate them, to sense the emotional temperature of a room the moment you walk in. These things, which once felt like strengths, start to feel like the mechanism of your own exploitation. And so some empaths, understandably and with the best possible protective intentions, begin trying to feel less, to sense less, to care less, to build a kind of internal armor that will prevent the same wound from reaching the same depth again. I need to tell you something about that impulse. I understand it completely, and it will not work. Not because you are incapable of building walls, you can build them and they will stand, but because the walls you build around your extraordinary perceptive capacity do not selectively block the painful signals while letting the beautiful ones through. They block all of it. And an empath who has succeeded in shutting down their sensitivity has not protected themselves. They have removed the most essential quality of their inner life in order to avoid having it hurt again. That is not a comeback. That is a different kind of loss. The actual solution, the one that the empath who genuinely completes their comeback arrives at through genuine work rather than bypassing it, is not to feel less. It is to choose more carefully where that feeling goes. The gift does not need to be diminished. It needs a new direction. It needs recipients who are worthy of it. It needs boundaries, not walls, but actual boundaries.
that distinguish between the people who engage with your empathy in honest, reciprocal ways and the people who relate to it as a resource to be extracted.
Between the relationships that grow when you invest in them and the relationships that simply consume the investment. This discernment, the ability to feel everything while choosing with intention where to direct the feeling, is the most sophisticated version of the empath's gift. And it cannot be learned from a book or acquired from a single insight. It is built slowly, through experience, through the kind of lived knowledge that only comes from having been through exactly what you have been through. Which means the experience that felt like it was destroying your capacity to trust, your capacity to connect, your capacity to show up fully in the world, was also, simultaneously, building the most refined version of those exact capacities. I said at the beginning of this that the comeback starts in the dark, in a quiet moment of depletion rather than a cinematic moment of revelation. And that is still true. But here is what I want you to understand about where the comeback ends. It does not end in a moment either. The comeback does not resolve into a single day where you wake up healed. It does not arrive as a moment of closure, a final conversation, a last piece of understanding that ties everything together and signals that the process is complete. The comeback is not an event, it is a direction. And the direction, once genuinely established, becomes self-reinforcing. Every day that you choose your own perceptions over someone else's version of them, the choice gets easier. Every time you honor a feeling that tells you something is wrong before your conscious mind has processed the evidence, your trust in your own inner life deepens. Every relationship you invest in that returns what you give, every connection that adds to you instead of drawing from you, every moment of genuine reciprocity after years of systematic imbalance, each one recalibrates something at the root of how you understand what connection is supposed to feel like. And slowly, without a dramatic announcement, without a transformation that anyone outside you would be able to point to and name, the version of you that exists on the far side of this experience begins to feel more real than the version that existed at its beginning. Not because the pain is gone, the experience is part of you now. It is not a wound you recover from completely and leave behind. It is a chapter in the story of someone who went through something real and came out of it different in ways that matter. But here's the final thing I want to leave you with, and I want you to really hear it, not as motivation, not as comfort, but as an accurate description of what the psychological literature on post-traumatic growth and what the lived testimony of people who have completed this process actually shows. The person you are building on the other side of this is not a repaired version of who you were before. They are not a patched version. They are not a recovered version. They are a more complete version. The emotional range you have now, the ability to hold both the depth of pain you have experienced and the stubborn persistence of hope in a single moment, is not something that can be developed in the absence of genuine difficulty. The perceptive clarity you carry, the ability to recognize the difference between a person who shows warmth and a person who is warm, was bought at a price, and it is yours permanently now. The boundaries you are learning to build, not from fear, not from bitterness, but from an honest and hard-earned understanding of what your energy is worth, are the boundaries of someone who has paid for the knowledge that not everyone deserves the same level of access to who you are. You are not who you were. You are not supposed to be. The version of you that existed before the experience was generous and perceptive and capable of love that most people cannot access. Those qualities are still here, every single one of them. They are simply no longer available without conditions, without discernment, without the quiet and unshakable knowledge of your own worth that you are carrying into every room you walk into from this point forward. The comeback was never about returning to something. It was always about arriving somewhere new. You are already on the way. You have been since that quiet Tuesday, since that coffee going cold on the counter. Since that moment in the ordinary middle of an ordinary day when something in you stopped flowing outward and turned, finally, toward yourself. That was the beginning. And what you are building from it, slowly, honestly, without performance and without anyone else's permission, is the truest version of yourself you have ever been.